Hey folks, today we're going to talk about chapter 6. This is building on what we learned about with the Franks, and we're going to talk about the biggest, baddest, bestest Frankish king, Charlemagne, Charles the Great. So, if you have not already, you should go ahead and pre-read that. We're going to take our notes, and then after we discuss it and take the notes, I'll post it on the Google Classroom for your pleasure. All right. So I have these terms up on the board. I have Charlemagne's character, his conquests, his government, his religion and education, like reforms and stuff, right? And then his legacy. So why would we care about a dead old guy who was not made or a king until Christmas Day of the year 800? A long time ago. Christmas Day 800. So not 1800, not 2800, 800. So what I want you to do at your tables is you have these terms up here. I'm going to give you a few minutes, and you can turn to your neighbor and talk about these things. So, all right, go ahead. If you need to move closer to your neighbor, you got to put a mask on them. All right, got about another minute. Yeah, you're in the right place. Sorry, somebody was commenting. They're like, "Hey, is this world history?"
Nope, sorry.
No, this is Latin.
Yeah, sure.
This is Latin.
Like, how could you start a class? You would do the classroom. So how would
Hey, okay. So, All right, folks, so I don't have a lot of images for this, but I do have some. So this first image here, this is, so Charlemagne comes from these barbarian Germanic kings, right? So they still got a lot of this warlike warrior mentality. And so, and as a king, he was also a warlord. Yeah, he was a Christian, but he still had that warlord spirit. And so remember, like I told you before, to be an ancient king was to also kind of be like the leader of your church. And if people were within your borders, they were your subjects. And if they were your subjects, to not be part of your church was also to be treasonous, because you're kind of leader of both things. And so he had some people on the eastern part of his territory called the Saxons. So these are people that are closely related to like Vikings, right? And so they still follow old pagan Celtic religion. And so a few times Charlemagne had conquered the Saxon people, and he sent in missionaries to convert them to Christianity, because remember, ruling and religion were the same thing to him. And his idea of Christianity might be a little different than like a modern idea too, because to him it was all about monarchy, divine kingship, kind of like a Davidic thing, right? If you're familiar with that. So he saw himself as a new King David. And so the Saxons, however, still had their old Celtic beliefs. And so sometimes they would kill the missionaries who were brought there, and Charlemagne took this as a personal affront. And like a lot of ancient people, you had a war season. So whenever the crops weren't being planted or harvested, or if the winter wasn't like so bad, you went out and you went on a war, kind of close to home. And so Charlemagne would push out east during the war season and conquer these folks. But he kept showing leniency every time he conquered them. He's like, okay, if you promise you're going to obey my laws, pay my taxes, and convert to Christianity, I'm going to let you keep your other customs and stuff like that. Kind of like the Romans would do. Well, after a few times, he eventually is just going to totally go in and decimate them. So so he goes in, he's going to conquer them. He's going to kill off thousands of their military capable men. He's going to destroy something called the Irminsul, I think is what's called. It's their world tree. And so it was like this ancient oak tree, and they would carve idols into it and do human sacrifice and stuff like that. So he's going to chop that down. They're going to, I think they're like going to install new governors and stuff like that. So in modern terms, you might call it a genocide. But, it's like mass prisoner execution. So he's, but this is going to integrate the Saxons into Europe, into what we think of as modern Europe, with kings, and they're going to be Christians, and they're going to start eventually taking on feudalism. We'll talk about that later. Another people, the Avars. These are people who fought on horseback. In some ways, they're kind of related to what we're going to see later with Genghis Khan. So you got these people, they're from more of the east, kind of like on the other side of Russia. They're nomadic warriors. They grew up on horseback. They're very good at shooting their bows, even like in full gallop. And they can do this even like while in retreat. The horse is going one way, they pivot behind them, and they can shoot anybody pursuing them. So they were very good warriors. And they conquered their way all the way through a lot of what we call modern day Russia and a lot of the Eastern European Empire. And they hoard lots and lots of gold. Charlemagne is going to go in, he's going to conquer these people, and he's going to find whole cave complexes just full of treasure. And he's going to use this treasure to kind of like fund his kingdom from then on out. So apparently he's going to get super rich from this. Pretty happy about it. So, he's a warrior. He's got his loot. He's got his land. And as a great king, eventually he's going to get a request from the Pope to help him against the Lombards. Because remember, the Lombards came in and they're not going to be very friendly to the Italians living there. So the Pope's like, hey, will you please come help me? And so Charlemagne will take his army to go across the Alps, so this huge mountain range, to travel from the Germanic lands into Italy. He's going to put down the Lombards, conquer them once and for all, kind of like Pepin did before him. And to say thank you, the Pope is going to crown him emperor. And so by crowning him emperor, they're kind of hoping for like a resurgence in the old stability of the Roman Empire. And it's not really going to be that, but it is going to show that the Pope wants to be independent from the Christians in Constantinople in the Eastern Empire, something we'll talk more about later. So this is kind of like a political move on part of the Pope too. But Charlemagne likes it because Charlemagne loves Charlemagne. And so he takes the crown and he's going to accept this. And Charlemagne's going to be kind of a diplomat. He's going to have friendly relations with the Muslims in the Middle East. With I forgot which one it was. One of the caliphates. And he's going to actually receive from the Sultan an elephant so he's going to have an elephant living in Germany. I don't know how that thing lived in like a German winter, but it does. He's going to really, really like his elephant. He's going to have friendly relations with the Eastern Roman Empire. At one time, there's going to be an empress in charge, but the people there didn't like that because if there's one thing you remember, I told you like on day one, there's certain things that were normal throughout most of history, but a woman being in charge wasn't one of them. So they really rebelled against that. So she offered to marry Charlemagne. Charlemagne, loving himself from Charlemagne, accepted because he would love to reunite and have more land. But unfortunately for her, she was I think she was put under house arrest or assassinated, and so it never came about. But don't worry, he did marry. This is the Frankish Empire. There is going to be his lands, and so it shows Rome there, but that's more like he's protecting it. Rome actually had its own land around it. The Byzantine Empire, that's the Eastern Rome. I'm going to talk more about that later. The Emirate of Cordoba there, that's where the Moroccans came in and make it into kind of like a Muslim territory. Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, we'll talk about that later. We're not going to talk about Bulgarian Empire because it was Bulgarian Empire is kind of like really loose, just chaotic. And Slavs, that's Russia. For the most part, and those places were still kind of almost in the Stone Ages. So I think this is the last one. But yeah, a little bit about like Charlemagne. So he had a pretty big empire for his time, and there wasn't really a lot of that infrastructure that was around here in Rome. He had like good roads and stuff like that. So communication was pretty rough. So he's always going to love education. But like I said, he was illiterate. The story goes, he could speak several languages fluently, but he would sleep with books under his pillow, hoping that somehow they would teach him how to read. So the poor guy had some faults. He liked feasting. And he actually built his palace in Aachen, where it had a natural hot spring, so him and his boys could lay down in the jacuzzi whenever they were done doing king stuff. And that's what he called them. He called them pueri, my boys. So it's pueri in Latin, boys. So yeah, it's just a warlord with his boys going out getting loot and all that good stuff. He's a pretty devout Christian. He'd go to church every day. He had his own church built in Aachen. Think about some other things. His government was kind of loose. Like he would like keep tabs on people, but he would kind of let them run their own things. He built a lot of churches. Thanks to him, there was a resurgence in literacy and books because during this time, when the barbarians were sweeping through and Rome was falling apart, a lot of ancient books disappeared from a lot of this part of the world, but places like certain parts of England, it was kept safe. So he kept correspondence with, I think it was a guy called the Venerable Bede, or it was his student, Alcuin. Yeah, it was Alcuin. And so they were talking about how they could reopen like education and stuff like that, mostly for religious purposes, but still, it was trying to get reading. But yeah, he sort of called himself protector of the church. He was known as a pretty tall, big warrior. His armies were innovative at the time because he would ban drinking. And that was kind of like a weird thing for German armies, because usually they would get like really rowdy drunk before they go out to battle. But he kind of realized if you have guys going out there fighting like that, they might be brave, but they're stupid and we lose. So I wish I had pictures of it, but usually when he would call his armies in, these weren't like trained soldiers. These were conscripts. So they were like medieval peasants. And so they might bring whatever they had that they worked on the farm, like a wooden pitchfork and a family dog, and they'd come up and join battle like that. So these weren't like a whole bunch of guys in gleaming armor out there jousting and all that good stuff. It's more like a bunch of poor dirt farmers whacking each other with wooden instruments or implements. In fact, whenever they do excavations of ancient battlefields, like we'll talk about Battle of Hastings later, they actually find that most of the skeletons they find, that they're like broken bones all over them. You got like puncture wounds in their skulls. So it was pretty brutal warfare. His kingdom, the people were pretty poor. A lot of them still, since they were converted from Celtic paganism, a lot of them had a deep-seated belief in magic and witchcraft and stuff like that. And so, but the thing is like they didn't practice any of it. They just really, really believed it was out there. So they were really superstitious. I got a story, if I can find my printout, of this priest talking about how upset he was because he was trying to convert these peasants, and they were they were upset because they had bad crops, and they thought it was from magicians who were on sky ships throwing curses down on their crops or something like that. I was like weird. I don't know. Yeah, you may. There you go. There you go. You can come get it. All right. So let's go ahead and get our notes for now. So yeah, I need to get my I got a few books here on Charlemagne. I gotta find that story for y'all. But I got other stories too. Like I feel like I don't want to read about that. So does that totally understand? All right. So Charlemagne's character. What kind of guy was Charlemagne? Was he like a circus dwarf? Was he Hey Shelby, what kind of guy was Charlemagne?
Well, I know what he looked like, so I know how they described him.
Mm-hmm.
That probably isn't important. Hold on.
Like what's the gist of what you got out of it?
Well, I know he likes swimming and like sports and stuff.
Yeah, hunting. Hunting was like sports to them back then, right? I mean, it still is, but sports for shit.
Well, he was Christian. I know you talked about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's like a really physical guy. He's a warrior dude. Physical, Christian. Anything else?
I don't know. It said his life was filled with warfare.
Yeah, lots of warfare. Loved war. He also loved feasting and stuff like that. But he wasn't known for. He wasn't a drunk. They said he did like to overeat. It's kind of like his thing. That's his hobby. Okay. So his conquests. So did he have any? He did. Like what? Yes. So he expanded Frankish lands. And what's important about this? Yeah. What's important about this is we're starting to see, for the first time in a long time, hundreds of years, unity in Europe. There was no America yet, but there was the idea of Europe is developing, right? British lands, unity. Let's see, conquered Saxons. And I would just put and others. We don't have we will talk about the Saxons when we go to England later, because they take themselves from England. All right, so cool. All right, so we got that. What about his government? So we'll talk a little bit about it. What kind of government did he have in his lands? He was a king. So yeah. So he personally was a king, but how did he rule his kingdom? Poorly?
Was small, but
With what? Kind of. So yeah, he was very hands off. Yeah. Like he made laws, but he couldn't control all this stuff. He didn't have any ability to do it. So broke the kingdom up into smaller bite-sized chunks. It's like you don't eat a 12-ounce steak in one bite, right? That's how you end up in the ER. Yeah, so he broke it up into smaller, more governable parts. And he made sure that wherever he made one of these like counties, I guess you'd call them, he'd put like, they'd have a mission built, and the mission would often be a place where people could do trade, they could get charity, it could act as a hospital and stuff like that, but also as a place of education and stuff and spreading Christianity. But also they would have little rulers, little lords put in charge of it. How did he keep track of his lords?
He had like a little
message.
message.
Yeah, he had the Missi Dominici. Yeah. So Missi is sent. Dominici by the Lord. So sent by the Lord. So those are like envoys is the modern word for that. So he sent envoys in pairs. It's usually a religious guy and a secular guy. Because like I said, this is important to him. Kingdom, Christianity went hand in hand. So yeah, he would send these guys out just to check on them. And if they found that the Lord was being cruel to the people, he'd call them back home and put them on trial. So, but he wasn't like controlling day-to-day affairs. He couldn't, but he could at least keep tabs and make sure that things weren't totally falling apart, right? All right. What about religion and education? So we'll mention a little bit of this. Don't worry, kids didn't have to go to school back then. They were too busy trying to stay alive and not die. No. It's sad reading about this time period sometimes. It's like there's the annals, which means of Charlemagne's empire, which is just like a list of season, like the big things that happen. And like literally one of them is like, this year had a warm winter, many people died. This year had a cold winter, so many people died. You know, it's just
More people died.
Yeah. Mortality rates were terrible. So, what about religion? What did he do about religion? I knew it wasn't. It didn't look right. How do you spell it? What goes here?
I think it's just R-E-L-I-G-O.
E-O-N?
Just O-N.
O-N? Like that?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Wait.
No, that isn't.
Are you sure?
That's wrong.
It doesn't look right either.
Before the O.
An I before the O?
It looked Jews.
Okay. Ah, I got this wrong my whole life. Okay. All right. We're good. We're good. All right. All right. So now spell check's how I made it through college. So, all right. So religion and education. So, did he have anything to do with religion? Like,
It's
like,
made everyone Christian.
yeah. So he protected Rome.
Also protected the church.
Yeah. So he protected the Pope. And Rome. All right. Did he do anything else like for like normal people? Yeah. What about?
Oh, yes, he did. He made like some things.
Yeah.
He made stuff.
Yeah, built churches and missions. Exactly. And this is gonna be normal for European rulers forever. Like we would never think about that in America because now, the federal government has made churches before, like after the Civil War, and the Freedmen's Bureau go down south and build churches and stuff like that, schools and things like that. So, but it's not normal for America. So build churches and missions. I will just go with that. Now, education was some schools. He had big plans, but not a lot of it came to fruition. Some schools, and it was like clerical, which means like for the government, and religious, which is a word I know how to spell a little bit now. I will just say. We'll say pastoral, because it was really just to help make priests and stuff. All right, pastoral. All right, so legacy. Now here's the one where it's like it's not your reading don't really come out and just say it. So what would the legacy of Charlemagne be in your imaginations? So. Andrew, what do you think? Yeah, why? I mean, like, what would be important about this guy?
He brought lots of religion into Europe and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's true. That's true, and that's going to be like what's going to define Europe for a long time. So yeah, spread Christianity, sometimes violently, which.
He shoved it down the throat.
Yeah. That was kind of, I remember he wasn't spreading it violently because that's what the Bible said. He was spreading it violently because he was a warrior king, and that's what his warrior king families had done way back when, since before there was what. So it's more like a cultural thing. It's like, well, we've always killed people. Of course we're going to do that. So it's kind of like that. So, hey, like I said earlier, it's going to unify Europe. It's going to be some peace, kind of, for a while. It won't outlast him that long, though. He's going to be one of those guys who's going to, he's a really strong leader, but his kid is going to kind of be a little wimpy. And so then his grandkids are going to kind of beat up his son. And we'll get to that later. So, but another thing too, he's going to set the tone for what governments are going to be like in Europe for like ever, all the way up until about the modern era. You're going to have kings like him who have lords under them and a bunch of peasants. This is going to become normal. He is the king that they say that France sees as its founder and Germany sees as its original founder. So he's kind of like the starting point to a lot of these people. He's kind of like, I guess he's kind of like their George Washington in a way, you know? So, yeah. So, there you go. I guess it's good enough. Any questions? All right. Hey, tomorrow we're going to talk about chapter 7. Chapter 7 is kind of small, but there's some things that's missing from chapter 7 because it talks about what happens when his kingdom gets divided into 3. But it doesn't really talk about the civil wars involved. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. All right. All right. Good news. Good. That is good news. Monday's fine. All right. Hey, all right, folks, that's going to cut it for today. Make sure if you haven't already, read chapter 6, and tomorrow we'll talk about chapter 7. Wait, there is one more thing. In our Google Classroom, I set up our Quizlet, and Quizlet's what I use for our quizzes, right? Quizlet quizzes. It has vocabulary terms that I've taken from our reading, and I kind of added to the, I don't know, I guess I added to the definitions for them. Make sure you look at the chapters we've already read. Next week, I'm going to use that as the basis for making your quizzes. I'm going to post those quizzes up on Google Classroom, but it's going to be the same definitions and terms. So I'm going to expect some academic honesty to where you're going to not cheat when you do it, because you wouldn't do that.
We're going to the test thing?
Yeah, we're going to do Quizlet stuff next week. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to show y'all that now, but y'all can go ahead and go on Google Classroom and look that up. Bye. All right. So now, for those of you who are physically present,